Beneath the cold, silent waters of the Baltic Sea lies a mystery that has defied explanation for more than a decade. In the summer of 2011, a commercial diving expedition set out on what was meant to be a routine survey of the seafloor. Instead, they encountered something that would challenge science, ignite global speculation, and blur the line between history and the unknown. Hidden beneath layers of darkness and sediment, their sonar detected a massive object, perfectly shaped, strangely symmetrical, and unlike anything previously recorded beneath the sea. As the team moved closer, the object revealed features that defied natural explanation: smooth, curved surfaces, sharp edges, and what appeared to be man-made structures etched into stone. Equipment began to fail, compasses spun wildly, cameras went dark, and yet, when the images returned, they revealed something even more unsettling: a formation resembling steps, corridors, and constructed surfaces resting silently on the ocean floor. What lay beneath the Baltic Sea was not just a geological curiosity. It was a mystery that blurred the boundaries between science, history, and speculation. Was it the remnant of a forgotten civilization, a relic of secret wartime experiments, or something far older and far stranger than humanity itself? This is the story of the Baltic Sea Anomaly. Chapter 1: The Discovery Beneath the Waves. The Baltic Sea has always been a place of quiet mysteries. Its cold, brackish waters stretch between northern Europe's coastlines like a vast, dark mirror, hiding beneath its surface the remnants of countless forgotten stories, sunken ships, lost cargo, and the silent traces of centuries of human passage. For generations, sailors had spoken of strange currents and unexplained disturbances beneath its waters, but few had imagined that something truly extraordinary lay waiting in its depths. In the summer of 2011, a Swedish maritime exploration team known as Ocean X set out on what was intended to be a routine expedition. Their goal was straightforward: to scan sections of the northern Baltic Sea for shipwrecks that might contain historical or commercial value. The team had done this many times before. They were experienced, methodical, and accustomed to the long hours of monotony that often preceded discovery. Nothing about this mission suggested it would be any different. The vessel cut steadily through the gray waters, its deck slick with sea spray as overcast skies loomed above. Beneath the surface, the seafloor stretched out in vast, unbroken darkness. Visibility was notoriously poor in this region, and the team relied heavily on advanced sonar equipment to reveal what the human eye could not. As the ship moved along its plotted grid, the sonar system swept the seabed in slow, deliberate arcs, translating invisible contours into digital shapes on glowing monitors. For hours, the displays showed nothing but the expected: sediment, scattered rocks, and the occasional geological formation. Then, without warning, something changed. A large, anomalous shape appeared on the screen, smooth, symmetrical, and unmistakably artificial in appearance. It was unlike any shipwreck the team had ever encountered. Unlike the jagged outlines of wrecked hulls or the irregular forms of natural rock formations, this object had clean edges and a clearly defined circular structure. The silence in the control room was immediate and absolute. The sonar readings suggested the object was massive, nearly 200 feet in diameter, and resting squarely on the seafloor at a depth of roughly 300 feet. Even more puzzling was its apparent isolation. There were no nearby wrecks, no debris fields, no signs of collision or impact. It simply lay there, as if deliberately placed. At first, the team suspected a malfunction. Sonar glitches were not unheard of, especially in the complex underwater terrain of the Baltic. The operators recalibrated the equipment, ran the scan again, and adjusted the frequency. The image remained unchanged. As the vessel maneuvered for a better position, the outline grew clearer. The object appeared almost perfectly circular, with what looked like ridges or grooves etched across its surface. Some of these markings seemed to form straight lines, an unusual feature in a natural environment shaped primarily by ice, erosion, and time. Excitement began to spread through the crew, tempered by caution. Over the years, many supposed discoveries had turned out to be nothing more than unusual rock formations or imaging artifacts. Still, something about this anomaly felt different. The longer they studied it, the more it resisted easy explanation. Determined to learn more, the team prepared to deploy their remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. The small, tethered submersible was equipped with cameras, lights, and sensors capable of operating at significant depths. It had been used countless times before, but on this occasion, the atmosphere on deck was tense. Weather conditions were deteriorating, and time was limited. Every decision had to be made quickly. As the ROV was lowered into the sea, waves slapped against the hull, and wind howled across the deck. Crew members monitored the descent from a dimly lit control room, their eyes fixed on a bank of screens. The water grew darker as the vehicle descended, sunlight fading into a murky blue, then into near-total blackness. At first, the video feed revealed nothing but drifting particles suspended in the water column. Then, slowly, the seafloor came into view. Sand and sediment stretched out beneath the lights, disturbed only by the occasional rock or depression. The descent continued, and the tension in the room thickened. At approximately 70 meters, something began to emerge at the edge of the frame. A curved surface, smooth, unmistakably solid. As the ROV moved closer, the outline sharpened. What had once been an indistinct shape now appeared as a massive, disc-like structure embedded in the seabed. The crew watched in stunned silence as more of it came into view. It was far too symmetrical to be natural, yet unlike anything they had seen before. Then, without warning, the monitors flickered. Static rippled across the screens. The video feed stuttered, froze, and went black. At the same moment, warning lights flashed across the control panels. Instruments began to malfunction. Compasses spun erratically, depth readings fluctuated wildly, and communication with the ROV became intermittent. A wave of tension swept through the control room. Technicians shouted readings to one another, trying to stabilize the systems. For several long seconds, the ROV was effectively blind and unresponsive, suspended in the dark hundreds of feet below. Then, just as suddenly as it had vanished, the image returned. What appeared on the screen silenced the room. Directly ahead of the ROV was a structure that resembled a staircase, broad, evenly spaced steps carved into the surface of the object. The angles were sharp, the geometry unmistakably deliberate. It did not look like a random formation shaped by nature. It looked built. No one spoke. The implications of what they were seeing began to sink in. This was not merely a strange rock or an unusual geological feature. It was something else entirely, something that hinted at design, intention, and perhaps intelligence. As the ROV drifted closer, more details emerged. Grooves cut into the surface formed patterns reminiscent of corridors or passageways. Portions of the structure appeared elevated, while others sank into the surrounding sediment, as if the object had settled or been partially buried over time. And yet, as compelling as the visuals were, the equipment continued to struggle. Electrical interference plagued the instruments. Battery levels dropped faster than expected. The team realized they were pushing the limits of their technology and possibly their safety. Reluctantly, the decision was made to pull the ROV back. The sea was growing rougher, and the risk of losing the vehicle entirely was increasing by the minute. As the tether reeled in and the lights of the craft slowly disappeared from view, a heavy silence settled over the crew. They had come seeking shipwrecks. Instead, they had found a mystery. Back on deck, no one spoke for several minutes. Each person processed what they had seen in their own way. Excitement, disbelief, unease. The data collected was incomplete, fragmented, and filled with unanswered questions. Yet one thing was certain. The Baltic Sea had revealed something extraordinary, something that should not have been there. And whatever it was only the beginning. Chapter 2: Into the Storm. The decision to return to the anomaly was not made lightly. In the days following the initial discovery, the atmosphere aboard the Ocean X vessel had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a routine survey had transformed into something far more consequential. The images captured by the ROV, fragmented, incomplete, yet undeniably strange, circulated among the crew in hushed conversations. Each frame was studied, re-examined, argued over. Every line, shadow, and contour seemed to invite a new interpretation. Yet no matter how many times the footage was reviewed, one truth remained unavoidable. They had not seen enough. To understand what lay beneath the Baltic Sea, they would have to go back. but returning would not be easy. The Baltic in late summer is notoriously unpredictable. Calm mornings can dissolve into violent squalls within hours, and the deeper waters conceal powerful undercurrents that challenge even the most experienced mariners. Still, the team knew that waiting too long could mean losing their chance altogether. Weather windows were narrow, funding was limited, and the anomaly was too important to ignore. Preparations began almost immediately. The vessel was restocked with fuel, replacement parts, and backup systems. Engineers reinforced the ROV's housing and recalibrated its sensors in an attempt to shield them from the unexplained interference encountered during the first dive. New sonar configurations were tested. Redundancies were added wherever possible. Every precaution was taken, yet no one could say with confidence that it would be enough. As the ship departed once more into the Baltic, a sense of unease followed it from the harbor. The sky was low and heavy with clouds, the horizon a blurred line between steel gray sea and sky. Wind whipped across the deck, carrying with it the sharp bite of salt and cold. Even seasoned crew members felt the tension building as the vessel pushed deeper into open water. Hours passed in near silence. The hum of engines and the rhythmic crash of waves were the only sounds as the ship closed in on the coordinates recording the previous expedition. Each crew member understood the significance of what they were about to attempt. They were returning not just to a location, but to a mystery that challenged everything they believed about the seafloor. When the ship finally reached the target zone, the sea seemed almost unnaturally calm. The contrast was unsettling. The wind eased, the waves flattened, and an eerie stillness settled over the water. The calm felt unnatural, as if the ocean itself were holding its breath. The captain ordered the engines reduced, and the ship drifted into position above the anomaly. Below them, hundreds of feet beneath the surface, the unknown waited. The ROV was prepared for deployment once more. Technicians moved with precision, securing cables, checking seals, and running final diagnostics. The vehicle had been reinforced since its last descent. Its systems hardened against interference, at least in theory. As the crane arm lifted the ROV and swung it over the side, the crew gathered around the monitors. There was little conversation now. Every face reflected the same mixture of anticipation and apprehension. With a hiss of hydraulics, the machine was lowered into the dark water. At first, the descent was uneventful. The cameras showed only drifting particles illuminated by the vehicle's lights, swirling like snow in the blackness. Depth readings ticked steadily downward. 20 meters, 40, 60. The surface light faded, replaced by a heavy blue gloom. At around 70 meters, the familiar signs of the seafloor began to emerge. Subtle changes in texture appeared on the monitor. Undulating sediment, scattered rocks, faint ridges shaped by ancient currents. The operators leaned closer, scanning for the first hint of the anomaly. Then slowly it appeared. A shadow emerged at the edge of the frame. Not a blur or distortion, but a defined mass, darker than the surrounding seabed. As the ROV descended further, the object's outline became unmistakable. It was enormous. The structure rose from the seabed like a vast stone disk, its edges smooth and unnaturally uniform. Unlike jagged rock formations shaped by erosion, this structure possessed symmetry. Its surface curved gently upward, giving the impression of deliberate design rather than natural formation. The room fell silent. Even the most skeptical members of the crew felt a chill run through them. This was no trick of light, no sonar illusion. The object was real, and it was unlike anything any of them had seen before. The ROV moved closer, its lights sweeping across the surface. Patterns emerged, shallow grooves, straight lines, and what appeared to be sharp angles carved into the stone. These were not random fractures. They looked intentional. As the vehicle descended further, something unexpected happened. The instrument panel flickered. For a brief moment, the video feed stuttered. Then it stabilized. The readings fluctuated wildly, depth, orientation, and compass direction, all behaving erratically. The technicians exchanged uneasy glances as they attempted to recalibrate. Interference, someone muttered. But from what? The ROV continued its descent, now hovering just above the surface of the structure. The lights revealed more detail, a series of stepped formations, almost like stairs, leading up toward a raised section at the center. The geometry was unmistakable. This was not the work of erosion. The realization sent a ripple of tension through the room. Then, without warning, the screens went black. A collective gasp filled the control room. Alarms chimed. Data streams froze. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The ROV had gone completely dark. Engineers scrambled to diagnose the failure. Power readings fluctuated wildly. The communication link dropped in and out, as if something were interfering with the signal. The possibility that the vehicle had been lost, trapped, or damaged on the seabed hung heavily in the air. Then, just as abruptly as it had vanished, the video feed returned. The image that appeared was unlike anything the team had expected. The camera now faced a massive, sloping surface marked by deep, symmetrical grooves. The structure loomed directly ahead, its scale dwarfing the ROV. The sense of depth and solidity was unmistakable. This was not a trick of light or a quirk of geology. This was a constructed surface. Silence filled the control room once again. No one spoke. No one moved. Every eye was fixed on the screen. As the ROV inched closer, additional details came into view. Edges that looked intentionally shaped, patterns too regular to be natural, and surfaces that appeared worn as though by time rather than erosion. The object seemed ancient, yet oddly preserved. And then something else became clear. The structure was not alone. Beyond its curved perimeter, faint shapes could be seen protruding from the seabed. Rectangular forms, partially buried, aligned in a way that suggested design rather than chance. Some appeared to connect to the main structure, forming what looked disturbingly like pathways or tunnels disappearing beneath the sediment. A sense of unease settled over the crew. Whatever lay beneath them was not simply a geological oddity. It was a site, a place. And as the ROV hovered silently above the alien landscape, the realization took hold that they were not just observing a strange object, but standing on the threshold of something profoundly unknown. The sea around them remained silent. But the deeper they looked, the more it felt as though something, long buried and long forgotten, was beginning to stir. Chapter 3: Descent into the Unknown. The moment the ROV stabilized above the structure, an uneasy stillness settled over the control room. No one spoke. The soft hum of machinery and the low crackle of radio static were the only sounds breaking the silence. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the glowing monitors, as if looking away might cause the image to vanish. Below them, the structure waited. The lights of the remotely operated vehicle swept slowly across its surface, revealing details that defied simple explanation. The surface was not jagged like natural rock formations, nor smooth like volcanic glass. Instead, it appeared worn, shaped, marked by time, pressure, and purpose. Long, shallow grooves ran in deliberate patterns, intersecting at precise angles. Some sections sloped gently upward, while others dropped off sharply into darkness. It was enormous, larger than any natural formation the team had encountered at this depth. And yet, it did not appear chaotic or random. It looked intentional. The pilot adjusted the ROV's position, carefully nudging it closer. The craft responded sluggishly, as if moving through thick resistance. Instruments flickered again, minor fluctuations, but enough to draw concern. The crew exchanged glances, unspoken tension hanging in the air. "Telemetry's unstable," one technician muttered. "I'm getting interference across multiple channels." "Keep going," the expedition lead replied quietly. "Slow and steady." As the ROV descended another few meters, its lights illuminated a sloping surface that rose gently toward a central elevation. What at first appeared to be a simple curve now revealed itself as a tiered formation, broad, step-like levels arranged in a circular pattern. It looked disturbingly intentional. No known geological process produced shapes like this. The camera drifted closer, revealing deep grooves etched into the surface, some running parallel, others intersecting at precise angles. In places, the grooves formed patterns resembling corridors or pathways. Sediment had settled into these recesses, but the structure beneath remained unmistakable. The realization crept over the crew almost simultaneously. This was not just a formation, it was a structure. A murmur passed through the control room, quickly silenced by the weight of the moment. Even the most skeptical among them found themselves struggling for rational explanations. As the ROV circled, its lights caught on something protruding from the surface. a raised formation, almost like a dome or mound. The structure appeared to rise from the center of the disk, giving the impression of a focal point, perhaps even a chamber. The vehicle hovered closer, its cameras adjusting automatically to compensate for the shifting light and depth. With every meter, the tension grew thicker. Then the interference worsened. The image flickered. Static lines crawled across the screen. Audio feeds hissed and popped. Data streams began dropping out entirely. One of the technicians cursed under his breath as he tried to stabilize the signal. "Power levels are dropping faster than they should," he said. "Something's not right." Before anyone could respond, the video feed cut out completely. For a long, dreadful moment, the screens were black. A hush fell over the control room, thick, suffocating. The only sound was the distant hum of the ship's engines and the faint whine of electronics struggling to re-establish contact. "Do we still have the tether?" someone asked. "Signal's intermittent," came the reply. "I can't get a clean read." Seconds dragged on, stretching into an eternity. The thought that the ROV might be lost, trapped or crushed against the structure, hung heavily in the air. But more unsettling was the thought of what might have caused the sudden failure. Then, without warning, the monitors flickered back to life. The image that returned sent a chill through everyone present. The ROV's camera now faced a vertical surface, close enough to reveal fine detail. The structure was not smooth stone, as they had assumed. It bore markings. Deep, deliberate incisions carved into the material in repeating patterns. Some lines were straight and precise, others curved in arcs that suggested symmetry rather than chaos. It was architecture. The light swept slowly across the surface, revealing edges, corners, and what appeared to be recesses or openings. These were not cracks formed by pressure or erosion. They were too uniform, too deliberate. The camera panned downward. There, partially buried in sediment, was a flat platform extending outward like a landing or a step. The edges were worn but clearly defined. Beyond it, darker shapes hinted at further structures extending into the seabed. A stunned silence filled the room. Someone finally spoke, their voice barely above a whisper. "That's not natural." No one disagreed. As the ROV hovered, the team watched in disbelief as the structure seemed to stretch beyond the limits of the camera's light. It was larger than initially thought, far larger. Whatever it was not a single object, but part of something far more complex. The realization brought with it an unsettling question. If this was a structure, who built it? The ROV attempted to maneuver closer to one of the openings. As it did, the interference intensified. The video feed jittered violently, colors warping and distorting. The compass spun erratically, refusing to settle. Systems began shutting down one by one as if overwhelmed by an unseen force. "Pull it back," someone urged. "We're losing control." Before the command could be fully executed, the feed cut out again, this time longer than before. The room plunged into darkness lit only by emergency displays. For several long seconds, there was nothing. Then the video returned. The ROV was now facing a different angle entirely, as though it had been turned without command. Directly in front of the camera was a steep stair-like formation leading upward into shadow. Each step was wide and flat, unnaturally precise, and worn smooth by what looked like immense age. The implication was chilling. This was not just a structure, it was a place. The camera lingered there, capturing the silent geometry of the steps, the way sediment had settled into every groove, the way the light faded into darkness beyond. No marine life passed through the frame, no fish, no movement at all. It was as if the place itself repelled life. Then, slowly, the feed began to degrade once more. Colors drained, the image blurred, systems flickered and failed in rapid succession. "Bring it up," the expedition leader ordered. Now! The ROV began its ascent, retreating from the structure as the tether reeled in. The image grew smaller, the strange architecture fading back into darkness. Moments later, the screen went black for the final time. When the feed did not return, no one spoke. The silence that followed was heavy, contemplative, and uneasy. They had seen enough to know that what lay beneath the Baltic Sea was not a simple anomaly. It was something complex, ancient, and profoundly unsettling. As the ROV was hauled back onto the deck, damaged but intact, the crew gathered in stunned silence. No one celebrated. No one spoke of triumph. Instead, there was a shared understanding, an unspoken agreement that what they had witnessed challenged everything they thought they knew about the world beneath the waves. They had descended into the unknown, and whatever lay down there had noticed them. Chapter 4: A Structure Beneath the Sea. The hours following the ROV's recovery passed in near silence. The vessel rolled gently atop the cold Baltic waters, its engines idling as if reluctant to disturb the surface beneath which something ancient and unsettling lay hidden. No one spoke of leaving. No one suggested moving on. The images captured during the dive replayed again and again on the monitors, each viewing revealing new details and raising new questions. What they had seen could not be dismissed as illusion or malfunction. The structure beneath the sea was real, tangible, and far more complex than any of them had anticipated. As technicians stabilized the recovered ROV and began assessing the extent of the interference damage, the rest of the crew gathered in the control room. The air was thick with anticipation and unease. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of equipment and the occasional tap of fingers against metal consoles. On the largest screen, a still image from the final moments of the descent filled the room. It showed the structure in stark clarity, a massive formation rising from the seabed, its surface etched with deliberate patterns. The camera angle captured the curvature of the object, giving it the unmistakable appearance of a constructed form rather than a natural outcrop. No one needed to say it aloud. The conclusion had already settled heavily in their minds. This was not just a rock. The lead surveyor leaned closer to the screen, tracing a finger along the edges of the image. The grooves were too precise, too evenly spaced. Nature, even in its most violent or symmetrical expressions, did not produce geometry like this. The patterns resembled corridors, ramps, or even stairways, elements designed with intention. The structure appeared to rise from the seabed as a single cohesive mass, yet closer inspection revealed multiple layers. Portions of the surface were smooth and worn, while others were sharply defined, as if shielded from erosion. In several places, straight lines intersected at near-perfect angles, forming shapes that hinted at construction rather than coincidence. And there were the openings. Along the outer edge of the structure, several dark recesses were visible, rectangular voids that seemed to lead inward. Whether they were entrances, collapsed chambers, or simply cavities carved by time was impossible to say. But their symmetry was undeniable. The team began compiling a composite image using all available footage, stitching together frames to form a clearer picture of the anomaly's overall shape. As the image took form, the true scale of the structure became apparent. It was enormous. The estimated diameter exceeded 60 meters, nearly the length of a football field. Its height varied, rising gently toward a central elevated section that resembled a platform or dome. The entire formation appeared to be embedded in the seabed, as though it had either sunk into place or been deliberately positioned there. What unsettled the team most was the apparent lack of natural explanation. Geological formations in the Baltic region were well documented. The seabed was shaped primarily by glacial activity, sediment deposits, and erosion. Nothing in the known geological record accounted for a structure of this shape, size, or symmetry. One of the geologists on board pointed out that basalt formations could, in rare cases, form columnar or geometric patterns. But even he admitted that this structure bore little resemblance to known volcanic formations. There were no signs of lava flow, no basalt columns, no surrounding debris fields typically associated with volcanic activity. Moreover, the area showed no history of volcanic events for millions of years. The questions multiplied. If the structure was not natural, then what was it? And more importantly, who or what had created it? The team turned their attention back to the data logs from the ROV's sensors. The interference patterns were particularly troubling. During the descent, electromagnetic readings had fluctuated wildly, spiking and dropping without any apparent cause. These disturbances appeared to intensify as the ROV approached the structure, suggesting a localized source. One engineer hypothesized that the anomaly might be affecting electromagnetic fields, perhaps due to unusual mineral composition. Another suggested the presence of metallic elements buried within the structure, yet preliminary scans had failed to detect significant metal content. That contradiction deepened the mystery. If the object was not metallic, how was it disrupting electronics so severely? And if it was not geological, what was its origin? As the hours passed, discussions grew more speculative. The team began reviewing historical records, charts, and naval logs, searching for any mention of unusual features or anomalies in the area. They found none. The location lay far from known shipping lanes and had no recorded history of maritime construction. The idea that the structure could be ancient began to take hold. Some speculated that it might be the remnants of a long-lost civilization, perhaps one that predated recorded history. The Baltic region, after all, had been shaped dramatically by the last ice age. Vast stretches of land that were once above water now lay submerged. Could this structure have been built on dry land, only to be swallowed by rising seas over thousands of years? The notion was both thrilling and unsettling. If true, it would mean that an advanced society existed in the region long before any known civilization, possessing the knowledge and capability to construct large-scale stone structures. Such an idea challenged established timelines and threatened to rewrite portions of human history. Others offered alternative theories. Perhaps the structure was not ancient but modern, an abandoned military installation, a Cold War experiment hidden beneath the sea. The Baltic had been a strategic hotspot for decades, its waters patrolled by submarines and surveillance vessels. Could this be the remnant of a classified project concealed beneath layers of secrecy and time? The thought sent a chill through the room. But even that explanation struggled to account for the structure's size, age, and apparent integration with the seabed. Military installations were typically modular, metallic, and functional, not massive stone-like formations seemingly fused with the earth itself. As debates continued, one thing became increasingly clear: the structure defied simple classification. Late into the night, the crew reviewed the final frames captured before the ROV lost signal. One image, in particular, drew everyone's attention. It showed what appeared to be a wide, circular platform with a raised edge, almost like a dais or stage. At its center, a shallow depression suggested something had once rested there. The implication was chilling. Whatever this structure had been, it might not have been passive. It may have served a purpose. The idea lingered unspoken, heavy in the air. As exhaustion set in, the crew dispersed, leaving only a few to monitor systems and continue analysis. Outside, the sea remained calm, betraying none of the secrets hidden beneath its surface. Below them, the structure lay silent once more. But the feeling persisted, an unshakable sense that the discovery was only the beginning, that whatever had been uncovered beneath the Baltic Sea was not merely an anomaly, but a fragment of a much larger story waiting to be uncovered. And as the ship drifted under the cold stars, one question echoed in the minds of all who had seen the images. If this structure was built by someone, where were they now? Chapter 5: The Silent Interference. The night after the discovery was restless. A low fog drifted across the Baltic Sea, blurring the boundary between water and sky until the world seemed suspended in a gray void. The research vessel rocked gently against the swell, its lights casting pale reflections across the surface. Below, hidden beneath hundreds of meters of cold water, the structure remained, silent, immovable, and utterly indifferent to the human attention it had drawn. On board, sleep came in fragments. The images from the dive replayed endlessly in the minds of the crew. The smooth stone surface, the geometric lines, the unnatural symmetry. No matter how often they replayed the footage, the same unease returned. It wasn't just what they had seen, it was how it had made them feel. By morning, the decision was unanimous. They would return to the site. Not to descend further, at least not yet, but to observe, to monitor, to test the anomaly's behavior under controlled conditions. If something down there was interfering with their equipment, they needed to understand how and why. The ship repositioned itself above the coordinates with careful precision. The sea was calm again, unnervingly so, as if holding its breath. The technicians prepared an array of instruments designed to measure electromagnetic fluctuations, acoustic disturbances, and temperature shifts in the water column. Unlike the ROV, these sensors were passive, meant to observe rather than intrude. The first readings came back normal. For several minutes, everything behaved as expected. Data streamed across the monitors in steady, unremarkable lines. The crew exchanged cautious glances. Perhaps the earlier interference had been a fluke, a coincidence, equipment failure. Then, without warning, the readings began to change. A faint electromagnetic spike appeared on the monitors, barely noticeable at first. Then another, and another. "Is that interference?" one of the technicians asked. "No," came the reply after a pause. "It's too consistent." The readings were rhythmic, rising and falling in a pattern that suggested structure rather than randomness. Not noise, not static, something else. As the sensors were lowered closer to the seafloor, the anomalies intensified. Frequencies spiked and dropped in waves, as if responding to the presence of the instruments themselves. The closer the sensors came to the anomaly, the stronger the effect became. The crew exchanged uneasy looks. "It's almost like it knows we're here," someone muttered. The comment drew nervous laughter, quickly silenced by the growing sense of unease in the room. Then came the first system failure. One of the monitoring stations blinked and went dark without warning. The backup system kicked in automatically, but within seconds it too began to falter. Data streams froze. Timestamps glitched. The air in the control room felt suddenly heavy, as if the pressure had shifted. Engineers scrambled to stabilize the systems, rerouting power and rebooting software. But the problems persisted, spreading from one console to another like a contagion. It was not random. The disturbances seemed to occur in pulses, brief surges followed by moments of calm. And every time the sensors were adjusted closer to the seafloor, the interference intensified. Then came the sound. At first it was barely perceptible, a low hum vibrating through the metal floor of the ship. It was not loud, nor sharp, but deep and resonant, felt more than heard. Some of the crew mistook it for engine noise until they realized the engines were idling. The hum grew stronger, rising and falling in a slow rhythm. Someone turned pale. "That's not coming from us." The sound seemed to emanate from below, traveling upward through the hull. It wasn't constant, it pulsed like a distant heartbeat. Instruments began to register anomalous vibrations, their readings fluctuating in time with the sound. Panic began to creep in. "What if it's seismic?" someone asked. The geologist shook his head. "This isn't a quake. The frequency's all wrong." As the minutes passed, the sensation intensified. Several crew members reported headaches, dizziness, and a sudden pressure in their ears. One technician staggered back from his console, clutching his head, claiming he felt disoriented, like the room was tilting. The captain ordered an immediate halt to all operations. "Pull the sensors back," he commanded. "Now!" The winches whined as the instruments were reeled in. As the equipment rose through the water column, the interference began to weaken. The vibrations softened. The strange hum faded until at last it vanished completely. Silence returned. No one spoke for a long moment. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, the implications of what they had experienced settling heavily over them. Whatever lay beneath the ship was not passive, it reacted. Later that night, as data logs were reviewed, a disturbing pattern emerged. The electromagnetic disturbances were not random fluctuations. They followed a structured sequence, peaks and troughs occurring at regular intervals, almost like a signal, an intentional one. The idea was difficult to accept, yet impossible to ignore. The data also revealed something else. During the moments of strongest interference, certain frequencies aligned in a way that resembled artificial modulation. Not communication in any known sense, but not entirely natural either. The implications were staggering. If the structure was capable of emitting or manipulating electromagnetic energy, then it possessed a level of complexity far beyond any natural formation. And if it was capable of doing so in response to their presence, then it might not be inert at all. It might be active. The crew gathered once more in the briefing room, exhaustion etched into every face. Fear lingered just beneath the surface, tempered by professional restraint. They were explorers, scientists, engineers, but they were also human. "What if it's some kind of machine?" one of them finally asked. No one laughed. "What if it's still functioning?" another added quietly. Silence followed. The thought hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. The idea that something ancient, something buried for untold millennia, might still be capable of activity challenged every assumption they held about history, technology, and the nature of the world beneath the seas. Outside, the Baltic remained calm, betraying no sign of the turmoil beneath its surface. As night fell, the ship drifted slowly above the anomaly, its lights reflected in the dark water like scattered stars. Below, the structure lay unseen, silent once more. But the crew could not shake the feeling that it was aware of them, and that whatever force resided within it had noticed their presence. The sea had not merely concealed a forgotten relic. It had concealed something that was still alive. Chapter 6: Ocean X and the Search for Answers. Morning came slowly over the Baltic Sea, pale light filtering through a low ceiling of clouds. The vessel rocked gently, as if the ocean itself were attempting to lull its occupants into forgetting what they had witnessed the night before. But sleep had come to few aboard. The strange events, the interference, the vibrations, the sense of something unseen observing them, had left a mark on everyone. By dawn, the ship was alive with activity. Engineers reviewed system diagnostics line by line. Scientists replayed recordings frame by frame. The bridge buzzed with low conversation, punctuated by moments of uneasy silence. There was no panic, but there was an unspoken understanding that whatever lay beneath them demanded caution. Ocean X had faced uncertainty before. The team had built its reputation on navigating the unknown, finding lost wrecks, uncovering forgotten chapters of history, and venturing where few dared to look. But this was different. This was not a shipwreck. It was not a relic of a known civilization. It was something else entirely, and it demanded answers. The first step was verification. If what they had encountered was real, and not the result of sensor malfunction or environmental interference, it needed to be documented from multiple angles using independent systems. Redundancy would be the only way to separate fact from illusion. The crew began deploying auxiliary instruments, passive sonar arrays, magnetic field sensors, pressure gauges, and low-frequency receivers designed to detect subtle variations in the surrounding environment. These devices were not meant to interact with the anomaly, only to observe. The results were immediate and troubling. Within minutes of activation, several instruments began registering anomalies. Magnetic readings fluctuated wildly, far beyond what could be explained by natural variation. Acoustic sensors picked up low-frequency vibrations that pulsed at regular intervals, too rhythmic to be random. One technician compared the pattern to a heartbeat. Another likened it to a slow, mechanical breathing. As data streamed in, a pattern emerged. The disturbances appeared strongest directly above the structure and diminished with distance. The further the sensors drifted from the anomaly, the weaker the effects became. Whatever lay below was not only massive, it was active. The realization shifted the tone of the expedition. No longer were they merely observers. They were interacting with something that responded to their presence, even if indirectly. And that raised a deeply unsettling question. Was the structure aware of them? The thought lingered, unspoken yet palpable. As hours passed, the crew began cross-referencing their findings with historical and geological records. If the structure was ancient, perhaps traces of its existence had been recorded, misinterpreted, or forgotten. They scoured maritime archives, naval charts, and geological surveys dating back centuries. Most showed nothing unusual, but in obscure documents, old shipping logs, fragmented maps, and handwritten notes from early explorers, patterns began to emerge. There were reports of compass failures in the region, dating back hundreds of years. Accounts of sailors who claimed their instruments went mad in certain waters. Stories of ships that drifted off course inexplicably or reported strange lights beneath the waves before vanishing. Most had been dismissed as superstition or navigational error. Now they seemed far less dismissible. One particularly old log, written by a 19th century Baltic trader, described a place where the sea itself hums and warned of a stone beneath the waves that confounds all instruments. The description was vague, but the coordinates were disturbingly close to their current location. The implications were staggering. If the structure had been affecting ships for centuries, then it had existed long before modern technology and had remained undetected until now. The team debated possibilities late into the night, Some argued for a rare geological phenomenon, perhaps an unusual concentration of magnetite or an unknown mineral capable of generating electromagnetic fields. Others suggested that the structure might be artificial, perhaps an ancient installation built by a forgotten civilization, later submerged by rising seas. A few dared to voice more radical theories. What if the structure was not entirely inert? What if it was designed to emit energy, to interact with its environment in ways that defied conventional understanding? The room fell silent when that idea was voiced. Such speculation bordered on science fiction, and yet the evidence before them refused to conform to known science. By the following morning, the decision was made to conduct one final controlled descent, this time with enhanced shielding and a carefully calibrated suite of sensors designed to withstand electromagnetic interference. The risk was clear. Equipment could be lost, systems could fail, but without deeper investigation, the truth would remain forever out of reach. Preparations were meticulous. Every cable was reinforced, every sensor double-checked. The ROV was fitted with shielding materials intended to minimize electromagnetic disruption. Additional backup systems were installed in case of failure. When the vehicle was finally lowered into the water once more, the mood aboard the ship was tense but resolute. As it descended, the familiar darkness enveloped the cameras. The first readings came in stable, encouraging. The sea was calm, the descent smooth. Then gradually the numbers began to shift. Magnetic readings crept upward, frequencies oscillated. The telltale signs of interference returned, but weaker, more controlled. It was working. The ROV reached the depth of the structure and slowed. The cameras adjusted, cutting through the murk to reveal the now familiar outline of the anomaly. But something had changed. The structure appeared different. The lighting revealed subtle variations in its surface that had not been visible before. Faint lines pulsed gently, almost imperceptibly, as if energy were moving beneath the surface. The grooves and ridges seemed more pronounced, their geometry clearer. And then something astonishing happened. The interference patterns began to synchronize with the ROV systems, not disrupt them, match them. Readings that had once spiked erratically now aligned in stable harmonics. The noise resolved into patterns, repeating sequences that suggested intentional modulation. The structure was not merely reacting, it was responding. A stunned silence fell over the control room. The implications were staggering. If the anomaly was capable of interacting with technology in such a precise way, then it possessed a level of sophistication that defied current understanding. It was not a passive ruin. It was active, perhaps even aware. As the ROV hovered in place, its lights illuminating the ancient surface, the team realized they were no longer just observing an artifact. They were engaging with something that might still be functioning. And whatever lay beneath the Baltic Sea, it was not finished revealing itself. The chapter closed with an unsettling realization shared by everyone aboard. They had not discovered a relic of the past. They had awakened it. Chapter 7. Ancient Structure or Alien Relic. The question lingered long after the screens went dark. In the quiet hours that followed the latest dive, the research vessel drifted silently across the Baltic Sea, its engines idling as if reluctant to disturb whatever lay beneath. Inside, the crew sat in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones, their thoughts circling the same unspoken uncertainty. What exactly had they found? The evidence no longer allowed for easy explanations. The structure beneath the sea was not random. It was not the product of chance erosion or geological coincidence. Every scan, every measurement, every anomaly pointed toward intention, design. And that realization carried with it implications far beyond the scope of a single expedition. As dawn broke, illuminating the steel-gray surface of the sea, the team gathered once more in the operations room. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation and unease. Data from the previous dives filled the monitors. Maps, sensor readouts, electromagnetic signatures, and high-resolution imagery stitched together into an increasingly coherent portrait of the anomaly. What they saw defied categorization. The structure appeared ancient, its surfaces smoothed by time, its edges softened by centuries, perhaps millennia, beneath the sea. And yet, its geometry was too precise to be dismissed as a natural formation. The symmetry, the deliberate angles, the recurring motifs etched into the surface all suggested intention. The central question emerged, unspoken but unavoidable: who or what had built this? The most conservative among the team argued for a terrestrial explanation. Perhaps the structure was the remnant of a long-lost human civilization, one erased by rising seas at the end of the last ice age. After all, much of the world's coastline had once been dry land. Entire regions now submerged beneath the ocean had once been inhabited. Could this be evidence of a forgotten culture? One that flourished tens of thousands of years ago, long before written history? Some pointed to sites like Göbekli Tepe, which had already rewritten humanity's understanding of early civilization. If ancient peoples were capable of complex architecture far earlier than previously believed, then perhaps the Baltic structure was another piece of that forgotten puzzle. But others were not convinced. The structure's scale and precision raised troubling questions. The clean geometry, the near-perfect symmetry, and the apparent integration of the structure into the seabed suggested engineering capabilities far beyond what known prehistoric cultures possessed. There were no signs of tool marks consistent with primitive construction, no evidence of quarrying or transport methods that could explain its creation. And then there was the issue of material composition. The samples recovered from the site had been analyzed repeatedly, yet results remained inconclusive. The material appeared to be a form of stone, basaltic in nature, but its microstructure was unlike any known natural formation. It showed signs of having been subjected to intense heat and pressure, yet bore no evidence of volcanic origin. This contradiction troubled the scientists deeply. If the material was artificial, then it implied technology capable of manipulating stone at a molecular level. If it was natural, then it represented a geological process unknown to science. Neither possibility sat comfortably with conventional understanding. As debates intensified, some team members began to voice more radical theories, ideas that only days earlier would have been dismissed outright. What if the structure was not of human origin at all? The suggestion was met with uneasy silence. The notion of extraterrestrial involvement carried heavy baggage, decades of speculation, hoaxes, and fringe theories that had long been ridiculed by mainstream science. And yet, the data before them defied easy explanation. The structure's apparent ability to interfere with electronic systems was particularly troubling. The way it disrupted sensors, scrambled signals, and responded to proximity suggested a level of sophistication inconsistent with any known ancient technology. If the structure was artificial, and if it predated modern civilization, then the list of possible builders grew uncomfortably short. Could it be that something else had been here before humanity? The idea was unsettling, but it refused to go away. Late one evening, a senior researcher quietly raised another possibility. What if the structure was not ancient in the way they assumed? What if it was far younger, constructed not thousands of years ago, but within the last century? The room fell silent as the implications settled in. The Baltic Sea had been a theater of intense military activity throughout the 20th century. Submarines, experimental weapons, secret bases. Many projects had been conceived in secrecy and lost to history. Could the structure be the remains of a classified installation? A Cold War experiment gone wrong? A prototype never meant to be discovered? The idea gained traction. The Baltic had long been a strategic corridor, contested by powerful nations. It was not unreasonable to imagine that experimental technologies had been tested in its depths, then abandoned or forgotten. The strange electromagnetic effects could be the remnants of long-dormant systems. The structure's geometry might reflect engineering principles rather than alien design. Yet even this explanation had flaws. No known military technology matched the scale or apparent age of the structure, and no records, declassified or otherwise, hinted at anything remotely comparable. As the debate continued, a sense of unease settled over the group. Every explanation raised more questions than it answered. The structure refused to fit neatly into any existing framework. The more they studied it, the more it seemed to exist outside conventional categories, neither natural nor artificial in any familiar sense. As night fell, the crew gathered on deck, gazing out across the darkened sea. The water lay calm, betraying nothing of the enigma beneath. One of the scientists broke the silence. What if we're asking the wrong question? The others turned to him. Maybe it's not about who built it, he continued quietly. Maybe it's about why it's still there. The thought lingered in the air. What purpose could such a structure serve? Why had it endured, hidden beneath layers of sediment and time? And why, after centuries of silence, had it begun to reveal itself now? The answers remained elusive, buried beneath the Baltic like the structure itself. As the ship drifted in the darkness, one thing became clear to all aboard. Whatever the truth was, it would challenge humanity's understanding of its own history and perhaps its place in the universe. The question was no longer whether the structure was real. The question was what it meant, and whether humanity was ready to know. Chapter 8: Shadows of War. The Baltic Sea had always been a battlefield long before it became a graveyard of secrets. Long before sonar screens and research vessels traced their paths across its surface, the waters had borne witness to centuries of conflict. Empires rising and collapsing, fleets clashing beneath storm-darkened skies, and entire nations fighting for control of its narrow strategic corridors. The sea remembered these wars, even if history had begun to forget. As the investigation into the anomaly deepened, attention gradually shifted away from ancient civilizations and extraterrestrial theories toward a darker, more recent possibility, one rooted not in myth or prehistory, but in the brutal reality of 20th century warfare. The idea emerged quietly at first, almost reluctantly. What if the structure beneath the Baltic Sea was not ancient at all? What if it was the remnant of something built in secrecy, during a time when secrecy had become a weapon in itself? The thought sent a chill through the research team. The Baltic region had been a crucible of military experimentation throughout the 20th century. During both world wars, and later throughout the Cold War, its waters were used for submarine testing, mine deployment, experimental weapons, and covert operations. Countless vessels had vanished beneath its surface, their wrecks scattered across the seabed like silent tombstones. And among these known remnants, there were whispers, stories that never made it into official records, stories of hidden bases, of classified projects buried so deeply that even the victors denied their existence. The more the team studied the structure, the more unsettling the parallels became. Its location was not random. It lay within a region that had once been heavily trafficked by German naval forces during World War II. Submarine routes crisscrossed the area, and several unexplained losses had occurred nearby toward the end of the war. Official records described accidents, mechanical failures, or enemy action, but many details were conspicuously absent. As historians began re-examining archival material, patterns emerged. There were references to experimental naval facilities, to ambitious engineering projects undertaken in secrecy as the war drew to a close. Documents spoke of underground construction, of fortified installations designed to survive bombardment and remain hidden from reconnaissance. Most chilling of all were vague mentions of a Sonder project, a special project whose purpose was never clearly defined. Could the structure beneath the Baltic be connected to such a project? The idea gained traction as researchers compared sonar images with declassified architectural concepts from the era. Some of the shapes bore an eerie resemblance to theoretical designs, circular installations meant to house advanced equipment, shielded from detection and capable of operating independently beneath the sea. If such a structure had been built, it would have required immense resources, advanced engineering, and a level of secrecy unparalleled even by wartime standards. And yet the late stages of the war were marked by desperation. As defeat loomed, vast sums were poured into experimental technologies, some practical, others bordering on the fantastical. Engineers were tasked with achieving the impossible, often without concern for feasibility or long-term consequences. It was not unthinkable that a project like this could have existed. But if it did, why had it been abandoned? One theory suggested catastrophic failure. Perhaps the structure was never completed, or its systems malfunctioned during testing. a containment breach, a collapse, an accident so severe that it forced an immediate evacuation and a permanent cover-up. Another possibility was more unsettling. What if the structure had functioned exactly as intended and then been deliberately sealed off? As the researchers explored these possibilities, a troubling pattern emerged. The strange electromagnetic interference reported during modern dives mirrored anomalies recorded in wartime logs. Equipment failures, compass malfunctions, sudden power losses. At the time, such incidents had been attributed to mechanical faults or enemy interference. Now, viewed through a different lens, they seemed eerily familiar. It was as if the structure had always exerted some kind of influence, an invisible field that disrupted technology and confounded human understanding. And it was still active. The implications were staggering. If the structure was indeed a remnant of a wartime project, then its purpose might never have been purely defensive. It could have been an experimental energy source, a communication hub, or something far more dangerous. Some speculated about early attempts at harnessing electromagnetic phenomena, primitive predecessors to technologies that would only be theorized decades later. Others whispered of weapons designed to manipulate the environment itself. The line between science and science fiction grew increasingly thin. Yet there was another layer to the mystery, one that unsettled even the most hardened researchers. The Baltic Sea had claimed countless lives during the war. Ships sunk with all hands aboard, submarines lost without trace, entire crews vanished beneath the waves. What if the structure was not merely a machine, but a kind of monument, an unintended mausoleum built atop layers of human tragedy? As this possibility took hold, the tone of the investigation shifted. The anomaly was no longer just an object of curiosity. It became a symbol of unresolved history, of secrets buried too deeply to be acknowledged. And still, the structure remained silent. No inscriptions, no identifying marks, no clear purpose, only its presence, unyielding, enigmatic, and deeply unsettling. As the research vessel prepared for its next phase of exploration, a sense of unease settled over the crew. The Baltic Sea stretched out around them, calm and indifferent, concealing its secrets beneath dark waters. They had come seeking answers. Instead, they had uncovered a past that refused to stay buried. And somewhere beneath them, in the cold and crushing depths, the structure waited, unchanged, unreadable, and perhaps still watching. The shadows of war had not faded. They had merely sunk below the surface, waiting to be found. Chapter 9: Science versus Speculation. By the time the research vessel returned to port, the Baltic Sea Anomaly had ceased to be a curiosity and had become a controversy. News of the discovery spread rapidly, first through scientific circles, then into mainstream media, and finally into the vast, unpredictable expanse of the internet. What had once been an obscure sonar image now ignited debates across universities, laboratories, and online forums around the world. Every new detail was dissected, amplified, and reinterpreted through countless lenses of belief and skepticism. The line between science and speculation began to blur. On one side stood the scientific establishment, geologists, oceanographers, physicists, armed with data, models, and peer-reviewed methodology. On the other stood a growing wave of independent researchers, theorists, and enthusiasts who saw the anomaly as evidence that mainstream science was overlooking something extraordinary. The conflict was not merely about what the object was, but about how knowledge itself should be interpreted. Within academic circles, the initial response was cautious, even dismissive. Many experts argued that the structure was a natural geological formation, shaped over millennia by glacial movement and erosion. The Baltic Sea, after all, had once been buried beneath massive ice sheets capable of sculpting stone into unusual forms. They pointed to known geological phenomena, glacial erratics, drumlins, and scoured bedrock formations, as potential explanations. According to this view, the structure was an illusion born of limited data, distorted sonar readings, and human pattern recognition. The human brain is wired to see patterns, one geologist stated during a conference, especially when those patterns align with our expectations or fears. To them, the anomaly was a reminder of how easily perception could deceive. But others within the scientific community were not convinced. The anomaly exhibited characteristics that resisted conventional explanation. Its shape appeared too symmetrical, its edges too precise. The apparent alignment of features suggested intention rather than chance. Even accounting for erosion and sediment buildup, the structure did not behave like a natural formation. Furthermore, the electromagnetic disturbances recorded near the site remained unexplained. Natural geological formations could influence magnetic fields, but not with the consistency or intensity observed during multiple dives. Instruments failed in predictable patterns. Power drained rapidly. Compasses spun or froze. These anomalies did not fit neatly into existing geological models. As more data was released, the debate intensified. Independent researchers began conducting their own analyses, overlaying sonar scans with geological maps, comparing the structure's dimensions to known human-made constructions. Some pointed out similarities to ancient megalithic sites, circular layouts, radial symmetry, and proportional ratios that echoed structures like Stonehenge or Göbekli Tepe. The comparisons were controversial, but compelling. Could it be possible that a civilization far older than any recorded history had possessed the knowledge and means to build such a structure, only to have it swallowed by rising seas at the end of the last ice age? This idea, once confined to fringe theories, began to creep cautiously into academic discussion. Opponents pushed back hard. Extraordinary claims, they argued, required extraordinary evidence. Without artifacts, inscriptions, or undeniable proof of human workmanship, the theory remained speculative at best. And yet, the absence of evidence did not negate the questions. Another faction focused on a more contemporary explanation: advanced military experimentation. They pointed to the Baltic Sea's strategic importance during the 20th century and the well-documented history of secret weapons programs. The region had hosted submarine testing, underwater surveillance systems, and experimental technologies whose details remained classified. According to this view, the structure might be a relic of a Cold War project, an abandoned installation, perhaps a prototype for underwater detection or communication. The electromagnetic anomalies could be residual effects of experimental power systems or materials. This theory had the advantage of plausibility. Governments had concealed vast projects before. Why not this? Yet it too faced challenges. No known technology from the era could fully account for the structure's size, composition, or apparent age. Declassified documents revealed no program remotely resembling what had been found, and while secrecy could explain some gaps, it could not explain them all. As debates intensified, a third, more controversial perspective began to gain traction, one that bridged science and speculation in uncomfortable ways. Some researchers proposed that the anomaly might not be a structure at all, but a naturally occurring phenomenon shaped by processes not yet fully understood. Perhaps it was a rare convergence of geological forces that mimicked artificial design. Perhaps it was a remnant of a once dynamic system long extinct. This idea appealed to those wary of sensationalism. It preserved the integrity of scientific reasoning while acknowledging the limits of current knowledge. But even this explanation struggled to account for the anomaly's behavior. Its apparent interaction with electronic equipment, its geometric precision, its uncanny presence. The debate spilled beyond academic circles into public consciousness. Documentaries, podcasts, and online forums exploded with theories. Some claimed the object was a crashed extraterrestrial craft. Others insisted it was evidence of a lost global civilization erased by catastrophe. A few even suggested it was something still active, lying dormant beneath the seabed, waiting. Amid the noise, the original researchers found themselves in an increasingly uncomfortable position. They had not set out to challenge worldviews or ignite controversy. Their goal had been simple exploration. Yet now, their discovery had become a battleground between skepticism and belief, caution and curiosity. In private, many of them admitted a growing sense of unease, not because they believed in aliens or ancient supercivilizations, but because the anomaly resisted classification. It refused to fit neatly into any existing framework. Science thrives on patterns, on repeatability, on explanation. But the Baltic Sea Anomaly existed in the margins where data was incomplete and certainty elusive. It forced researchers to confront a difficult truth. Sometimes the universe does not yield its answers easily. As months passed, funding proposals were submitted, rejected, revised. Plans for further exploration stalled amid bureaucratic hesitation and scientific disagreement. The anomaly remained where it had always been, silent, submerged, and unresolved. Yet its impact endured. It had reignited debates about the limits of human knowledge, the reliability of perception, and the thin line between skepticism and wonder. It had reminded the scientific community that mystery still had a place in a world increasingly defined by data. In the end, the Baltic Sea Anomaly became less about what it was and more about what it represented, a test of imagination, a mirror reflecting humanity's enduring desire to understand the unknown. And as long as it lay hidden beneath the cold, dark waters, it would continue to provoke questions that science alone might never fully answer. Chapter 10: An Unanswered Mystery. Long after the headlines faded and the debates quieted, the Baltic Sea Anomaly remained exactly where it had always been, resting in silence beneath hundreds of feet of cold, dark water. The ocean above it continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to the questions it had inspired and the theories it had fractured. Ships passed overhead, storms rolled in and out, and below it all, the object endured, unchanged and unresolved. For those who had been closest to the discovery, the mystery never truly ended. The members of the Ocean X team returned to their lives, yet none of them ever fully left the site behind. Interviews years later revealed a shared sentiment, the sense that something had been left unfinished. Some spoke of frustration, of being so close to understanding, only to be halted by technical limits, funding shortages, and unanswered questions. Others spoke of unease, recalling the strange malfunctions, the sudden silences, the feeling that the sea itself had resisted their presence. They all agreed on one thing: whatever lay beneath the Baltic was not something easily dismissed. Over time, official interest waned. Governments offered no public follow-up. Research institutions moved on to safer, more fundable projects. The anomaly slipped into a strange limbo, too strange to ignore, too ambiguous to pursue. It became a footnote in scientific literature and a legend in online forums. Yet legends have a way of enduring. In the years that followed, independent researchers continued to analyze every scrap of data released from the expedition. Sonar images were reprocessed using improved algorithms. Theories were refined, abandoned, and revived again. Some researchers claimed to identify symmetrical patterns that could not be attributed to chance. Others argued those same patterns were nothing more than digital artifacts enhanced by expectation. The debate became a reflection of something deeper than geology or archaeology. It became a debate about belief. What does it take for humanity to accept that something lies beyond its current understanding? For some, the Baltic Sea Anomaly represented proof that our historical timeline might be incomplete. If an advanced structure truly lay beneath the seabed, then the story of civilization would need rewriting. Entire chapters of human history would have been lost, erased by time and catastrophe. For others, the anomaly symbolizes the dangers of interpretation without evidence, a reminder that curiosity, unchecked by rigor, can blur the line between discovery and delusion. And yet, even the most skeptical voices could not fully explain away every aspect of the find. Why did electronic systems fail in its presence? Why did its geometry seem so deliberate? Why did it appear so unlike its surrounding environment? No explanation fully answered all of these questions. As years passed, technology advanced. Deep-sea exploration became more precise. Autonomous submersibles grew more capable. Imaging techniques improved, and with each advancement came renewed speculation. Would someone return to the site? Would the mystery finally be resolved? But returning was not simple. The Baltic Sea is unforgiving. Weather windows are narrow, funding is scarce, and the legal and logistical challenges of deep-sea exploration remain immense. Each potential expedition faced layers of bureaucracy, risk assessments, and financial uncertainty. Perhaps some argued the anomaly was never meant to be fully understood. Perhaps its purpose, if purpose it had, was not to be discovered, but to remind humanity of how much remains hidden beneath the surface of our world. In a way, the Baltic Sea Anomaly became a mirror reflecting our own limitations. It exposed how dependent we are on technology, how fragile our assumptions can be, and how easily certainty dissolves when confronted with the unknown. It also revealed something else, our enduring fascination with mystery. In an age of satellites and instant information, the idea that something so large, so strange, could exist unnoticed for centuries captured the imagination. It reminded people that the Earth still holds secrets, that not everything has been mapped, explained, or categorized. And perhaps that is why the anomaly continues to matter. Not because it promises definitive answers, but because it invites questions. Questions about our past, questions about our understanding of nature, questions about what else might lie hidden, waiting quietly beneath the surface. As long as those questions remain unanswered, the Baltic Sea Anomaly will endure, not just as a physical object on the ocean floor, but as a symbol of humanity's unending curiosity, a silent structure in the deep, a mystery without resolution, and a reminder that some truths are not found, they are encountered, briefly glimpsed, and then lost again to the depths. The story of the Baltic Sea Anomaly does not end with discovery, nor with explanation. It ends instead in silence, an unresolved echo lingering beneath cold water and colder certainty. Long after the headlines faded and the debates cooled, the anomaly remained exactly where it had always been, unmoved by speculation, untouched by consensus. It did not reveal itself, nor did it vanish. It simply waited. Perhaps that is what unsettles us most. Human history is shaped by our desire to understand, to name, classify, and master the unknown. From the first cave paintings to the most advanced satellites, our species has always searched for meaning in the darkness. And yet, now and then, we encounter something that refuses to be defined, something that resists every tool we bring against it. The Baltic Sea Anomaly stands as one of those rare encounters, a reminder that knowledge has boundaries and that beyond them lies mystery. It is tempting to believe that every puzzle must have a solution, that every shadow hides a rational explanation waiting to be uncovered. But perhaps the anomaly exists to challenge that belief. Perhaps it is not meant to be solved, only witnessed. A silent presence reminding us that the world is older, deeper, and more complex than we often allow ourselves to imagine. For the scientists who studied it, the experience left a mark that statistics and reports could not capture. Many spoke of an unease they could never quite explain, an instinctive sense that they were intruding on something not meant to be disturbed. Others described a quiet awe, the feeling of standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. Not fear exactly, but humility. And maybe that is the true legacy of the Baltic Sea Anomaly. Not proof of ancient civilizations or alien visitors, not confirmation of secret technologies or lost histories, but a reminder of humility in the face of the unknown. In a world increasingly mapped, measured, and explained, mysteries like this force us to pause. They remind us that despite all our advancements, we remain explorers at heart, creatures driven by curiosity, forever drawn to the dark spaces beyond our understanding. The anomaly does not need to reveal its origins to have meaning. Its silence is its message. Somewhere beneath the shifting waters of the Baltic Sea, it remains, unchanged, unseen, unclaimed. A structure without a story, or perhaps a story we are not yet ready to hear. It waits, as it has for centuries, indifferent to human theories and debates. And perhaps one day, when our tools are sharper and our minds more open, we will return. Perhaps then we will finally understand what lies beneath the waves. Until that day comes, the Baltic Sea Anomaly endures as a quiet reminder of how little we truly know and how much there still is to discover.
Shadows crawl where the